Thanks.
Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks again for joining another Community Sync for PWA Studio. We have a few demos today, including some really great insight into the research that was done by our research team and Catherine and Sammy and Scott for the recent cart and checkout work. We have some demos. You're not going to demo?
Demo? It's up and running, and I can do it off develop now that I got merged.
We have demos for some of the GraphQL filter work that was done recently. Tommy, you have a demo?
Yeah, edit cart.
Yep, we have the edit cart demo. And then we have an update. I know that there's been a lot of questions about what's going on with community backlog, contributing community backlogs. So we have some updates on what we've been doing to improve that process, along with Jordan's help, and then some, a kickoff for how we're going to start working with community contribution in the project and backlog. So a lot of content there. We'll step right into it, and I'll turn it over to Catherine to talk about their recent research.
Hey everyone, thanks Andrew. Let me get sharing set up. So, everybody can see the keynote?
Yes.
Yeah.
So as Andrew said, we're here to just kind of quickly share some of the latest design research we've done for Vinia. And today we're going to talk about shopping cart and checkout. Do some quick introductions. I think you all know Soumya and Scott, the designers for PWA. This is my first time here, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Catherine Kyoto. I'm a researcher here at Magento. I work across our products, but have lately been lucky enough to be working with Soumya and Scott on PWA. So where did this research come from? Last summer, we did a series of merchant site reviews where we looked at merchant sites and we did kind of UX evaluations and then had conversations with merchants about what they struggled with on their site, what they wanted to do to improve it, that kind of thing. And what we saw were that merchants were frequently using Luma out of the box, even when that wasn't necessarily to their advantage. And we also heard from them that customization was tricky and expensive. So knowing that and going into Vinia, we want to make sure that whatever out of the box functionality we design really works in common use cases. And obviously we talk to our partners a lot, we talk to community, and we have Luma as a baseline. But here we wanted to fill in that one missing piece, which is how are shoppers experiencing kind of baseline shopping experiences online, and how can we roll those So prototypes for cart and checkout for desktop and mobile. And we did some prototype tests with 11 internal participants who were avid online shoppers. And we had them do kind of normal cart and checkout tasks in the authenticated and the guest experience. So this is what this research came from. And a quick note about this, you'll notice we say internal participants. So these are Magento employees who buy stuff online and who are willing to kind of put on their shopper hat and go through this prototype with us. Because of that, they're probably a little more savvy than your average shopper. They may be familiar with kind of cutting edge design patterns showing up online, and they probably understand the technical stuff behind it more too. So that's something to keep in mind as we look at the findings. Our goals for this were, baseline is just to find out where our prototypes met expectations and where they did not, where we maybe needed to change them and improve them. And here we wanted to get insight both on the functionality, like could it do what shoppers expected it to do, and the usability, could they figure out how to do those things? But we also wanted to kind of level up this knowledge a little bit to better understand the context and behaviors that shoppers bring to cart and checkout. So a little bit of that higher level stuff too. So with that, I will jump into the findings. These are divided into 5 kind of sections going linearly through from cart to finishing checkout. So here we have cart overview. And one other thing I should note, we had a ton of findings for each of these pages. And here we're just kind of pulling out the 2 that we think will be most relevant for the folks on this call, or the ones that really fed into our design decisions. So these are just sort of the cream of the crop, so to speak. So here we had a hypothesis we were testing for this first finding. We had seen this pattern of having an update link online, even when auto update was in place. We didn't really know why sites were doing that, but it seemed like something that was maybe useful. Otherwise, why would they be doing it? So we put it into this design and tested it. And we found that pretty much across the board, it was confusing. Shoppers did not understand why it was there if auto update was happening. So that is something we've changed in our design and removed it. The second thing we heard about was, you can see at that number 2 there, the 3 dots arranged vertically. We call those kebabs. And so that hides the additional actions that a adding item. And we were really curious if even these very, very savvy shoppers that we have internally in Magento would get what this was, and that they could click on it to get more actions. And we found that most participants did not get it. They did not know they could go there to edit or remove an item. So we're now considering whether we can expand those actions, but that is not something we've rolled into designs yet.
Yeah, and Catherine, if I can stop you just for a second here, I think oddly the combination of those two things you just mentioned, that sort of seeing this link for update, but not readily seeing these other things for edit or remove or whatever with the cart or with the item, people sort of gravitated to that update and thought that was the control to make a change to the, when really that's just to prompt the user, if they've changed the quantity, to click out of that field so that the system can recognize the new quantity. So those things kind of taken in parallel. I mean, both by themselves aren't a great experience anyway, but when you kind of pair the fact that you've got tools behind that kebab and this sort of update link thing exposed, they started to create some confusion. Anyway, thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, that's great. Great addition, Scott. And at the end of this presentation, I'll turn it over to Scott and Somia to answer any kind of specific questions about stuff like that. Okay, so our next section, 2 of 5. So this is really actions in cart, specifically editing or removing an item. We also looked at applying coupon codes, gift cards, that kind of thing, and messing with shipping options. But none of that really caused problems. So we'll focus on the edit and remove item at the top. The first thing we heard was that participants really expected to be able to step the item number down to 0. You can see in our prototype, the down stepper is disabled with one item. And so this is an update we've gone ahead and made. We also heard that participants expected to be able to click through either the item image or the item name to a PDP or a PDP-like experience, right? They wanted to be able to see the item again when they did that. And this was something that the prototype didn't cover, but it was good for us to know about expected behavior. And then finally, we specifically asked what they would expect to happen if they wanted to say buy 2 of these pants, but only one was available. And we heard that they would expect to get an error message explaining, why they couldn't add it to their cart. Jumping on to shipping. Here, there's some more kind of high-level findings that may be useful for the folks on this call. The first was that participants really called out the express checkout option we had, PayPal. They appreciated it, and we even heard that they wanted more express checkout options like Apple Pay or Venmo, even. Another thing we heard was that 2 participants wanted an expected address to autofill once they entered their zip code, which here is at the bottom of the form. That in that use case would probably be placed higher. And this is worth calling out, even though it's just 2 participants, because in a consumer context, like shopping, when folks do call out a specific feature expectation they have, it's typically something that they really want, because this isn't necessarily what they're thinking about all day. They're unlike enterprise users or people who are like doing this for their job. So worth thinking about there, even though it's not something we're rolling in. And then finally, something that maybe surprised us a little bit was you can see they wanted to be able to create an account here or assurance that they could create an account later. And so this is an update we've made. Scott, did you want to jump in?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying you break up a little bit, so we might have missed the first part of that.
Oh, no. How do I sound now?
You're fine now.
Okay. The first part was just about that participants really did appreciate the express checkout and wanted even more express checkout.
Oh, yeah. It was just that the last bit you were saying. So, sorry. You're fine. Okay. Move on.
Thanks, Scott. Let me know if I break up again. So the next kind of phase in our checkout was payment. And here we heard kind of 3 things that we immediately rolled into designs. The first was that we had in this initial prototype 2 email addresses, one for shipping and one for billing. About a third of our participants just sort of thought that was odd. And so we decided to consolidate to one email address. The second, and this is something that's probably pretty
Catherine,
useful.
if I may interrupt, sorry, I just wanted to
Yeah.
add some context around that first finding. So, as we understand currently, the email is collected at a cart level in Luma, and there was some concern from community when checkout was first demoed that there was no way to be able to change the billing email. And so what we did was we included this in the test to see if people would be sort of inclined to do that, and the major use cases that they would be using the same for shipping and billing in a B2C context. Perhaps in a B2B context, people may want communication around shipping and billing to be sent to different addresses, but we're not addressing those use cases in this B2C version of Venia. And also currently we don't have the ability from a Magento end to support communication going to two different email addresses. So keeping all of this in mind, we decided that at this point in time, we would not be able to offer the control to change the billing email and have it be different than the shipping one.
Okay, thanks, Samia. Another kind of higher level thing we heard that I'm just calling out on this page is that shoppers wanted to be able to see what they were buying throughout the checkout process. They wanted that reassurance that they were in fact buying the items that they intended to. So that is something we've gone ahead and rolled into designs of showing the items and their details on each page. And then the final kind of interesting call out here is this was just one participant. But when it came time to click continue here, he did not want to click that button. He thought that it would charge his credit card, even though it didn't say it would, because he said,
The recording is on.
Oh, my bad.
And so this is fascinating, right? Because this wasn't his real credit card. This was a prototype test. So when you encounter that kind of resistance, even in a kind of make-believe scenario, it suggests a kind of unease that even if a really small minority of shoppers experienced that, it could trip them up in the checkout process, which is obviously not what you want. So we've gone ahead and changed the wording on the continue button here to make it clear that they'll have another step where they can review their order. So once the order is placed, we arrived at the confirmation screen. And here we had kind of one big takeaway, which is that we have this create account button, which, obviously you want people to create an account. It, eases checkout. I don't really need to explain all the benefits of that. But here, most of our participants thought that if they clicked create account, they would have to re-enter all of their information. It would be a whole separate account creation flow, when in fact they would just need to add a password. And knowing that really changes their desire to kind of interact with that, to create an account, knowing how easy it would be. So we've gone ahead and made some updates to the language there to make it clear that it really is just a matter of adding a password. So that wraps up kind of the highlights of this first round of research. For next steps, we'd love to hear if folks on the call have questions about shopper needs or hypotheses about things that you think are in place or would work really well. We'd love to hear about them so that we can roll them into future studies and investigate them. Some of the areas we're talking about right now as things we might want to look into are bundled products, homepage, mini cart, offline shopping, subscriptions, and error messaging. But with that, I'll kind of open it up for questions and really turn it over to Scott and Soumya to field those questions.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yep. So, yeah, anybody on the phone or in the room, if you have questions now or later, feel free to ask anytime.
All right.
This weekend.
All right.
Thanks. I think, this is really great insight, I think, into, I think for everybody that's on the call and in the community, and you're seeing us start to roll out additional venue features, right, and storefront features, that there's a lot of thought that is going into those features. It's, we have an entire team dedicated to designing, researching, and make sure we're making clean and logical decisions for what we're rolling out. So, of course, we welcome the feedback from community. If you guys see us working on something, if you have questions about a particular design pattern, feel free to reach out to Catherine, reach out to Simon, reach out to Scott, right? And let us know your thoughts.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions on the line, we'll go to Tommy next.
Right. So this will be quick. This is a feature that I'll go ahead and wait till you share my screen.
Done.
A feature that we kind of discovered mid-development where we needed the option to like edit configurable items in the future as well. Simple products that have customizable options will also need to be editable. You'll see here this link previously was dead, didn't do anything. Now it opens this nice little edit item panel. It differs a little bit from that mini cart experience where you kind of see what you're editing, some additional information, and then all of the currently selected options. So if you select new options there, you can adjust things, and if you decide to cancel, you can just close the modal and say, oh, I meant to edit my dress instead. I meant for an extra small on that.
Goals.
So when you save, it just persists that to your Magento backend, reflects that those new totals in your cart, and you're good to go. So kind of to highlight some of the technical features there, we just continued heavily leveraging Apollo fragments and GraphQL here. So the really neat thing that once I committed either of these mutations to either just update quantity or to actually update the configurable options, which surprisingly enough is not an edit, it's actually a add and remove. But you'll see here that to kind of automatically re-render that cart listing, all I had to do was import this cart page fragment here. Say when remove item from cart, go ahead and return me the contents of my cart with all of this. So like with very little effort, as soon as this mutation comes back, it automatically triggers a new render. So this pattern has been amazing since we started implementing it. So it kind of showcases the power of Apollo and relying on that cache, and React to just monitor that cache and re-render when it needs to. So it's kind of just magic.
Awesome.
Magic. So I think nothing else huge there to call out. We reuse the quantity stepper component here, so that was brilliantly made by Steven, and I think started by
Implemented, maybe.
started by somebody in the community, right? Brendan?
Yeah, Brendan started all the work. I just finished it.
Cool. And also in the scope of this, maybe just a minor change. There's an article going around that talks about like on mobile. I can't really demo this on desktop, but on mobile, you have like input types. So like when I go to like edit this on mobile, your number pad would pop up, but that had the adverse effect of adding this like stepper, and it meant like we couldn't really style this input how we wanted to. But it turns out that that's actually like the number input type is not really usable at all. So we backed out that change. You'll see now there's no like native stepper here, but it does continue using that input mode of numbers. So when you do go in here, your number pad shows up. So it's really easy to change that. And then obviously if you just want to do the stepper functions, you can do that as well. So any questions, comments, grievances?
Can you tell me a little bit about how you tested the sort of tactile UX of this stepper, like on what platforms and in what contexts?
Oh, well,
Put you on the spot.
yeah, that was kind of just a little scope creep, to be honest. It's something that just came up, so I didn't like fully test the stepper in the scope of this change.
Gotcha.
but I did like bring it up on my phone and just made sure it worked. So, with my thumbs, is that tactile?
That's definitely tactile. Absolutely
With
counts.
my thumbs, yeah.
That was, yeah, so no feet.
Yeah. I'll still.
Nice.
Awesome. Any questions for Tommy? Other questions? Fantastic.
Hi. I have a question about the checkout and cart. Currently, there is, if you are clicking on the small cart, you will see a pop-up. But when you will change it to the new cart or to the new checkout, or what is the plan behind this to have two dialogues, a full one or a mobile one?
Yeah, so we have a story within the checkout work once we're done, once we're fully done with cart and checkout, to go back now and deconflict the experiences between what currently exists with that kind of mini cart and checkout flow, and then what exists with this full page view. So we still have plans to address that. I don't know that we have concrete answers for how we're going to do it, unless Jimmy's on the line and he wants to dive into the details. But we have a story in the backlog to address that once we're done with the existing work.
Yeah, we'll basically, the mini cart will become a true mini cart. We'll convert it from like a full checkout within the drawer experience to a more standard mini cart once we have everything working with the full page cart and checkout.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
All right. So now we have Steven, who's going to talk about filters. Is it sharing? Not sharing. Is it me?
This is my laptop. It's
Lower
not
left.
strong enough
Yeah.
for me.
Needs more protein.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to show off two things today. The first of which I've shown sort of in part before. The filter modal that you guys are all familiar with, that used to render on the category page and the search page. It was not functional before, and so I put in some work to connect this modal to the GraphQL server, or the backend. And I won't get too far into the technical details, but basically we have working filters now that are generated based on the possible aggregations that the GraphQL server returns, based on a category ID if you're on a category page, or based on a search term if you're on a search page. So, I wish these pictures were a little smaller, but we can apply some sort of filters within the tops if we want to see only cotton and we want to see rain color, whatever that means, and things that are more than $100. More than $100, and there you go. The filters are now applying. You can see everything is more than 100, and you just have to trust that these fit the filter attributes that I submitted. We could go into each one and inspect further if you wanted to.
Hey, Stephen, could you just do that again a little slower? The screen share has a huge amount of lag, and I didn't catch you just demo.
Yeah, sure. I just I'll reset them. So from a starting state, you're on a category page, and you open the filter modal, and maybe you want to make sure you're only looking at stuff that's less than $100, and you're interested in gold colored items. So you select those filters. None of this has changed. None of this experience in the filter modal has changed in terms of selecting the filters or applying. Once you apply, the filters that you selected are put into the URL, and then the category page reads those, is constantly monitoring the URL, reads them, and then performs a new GraphQL query for a subset of the data that it got back previously on the category page. So now we have filtered results for that. Everything on here will be under $100. It'll be gold colored. Again, our sample data doesn't match up exactly. But So one thing that I wanted to point out that you guys might find when you're in there working on this stuff, if you're trying to modify the filter modal on your own or how the filters work, the way that we generate these is from what's called aggregations. And one thing I ran into when I started working on this was I would generate these every time you would apply a filter. So what would happen is you'd open up the category page, you'd get the initial set of aggregations, you would select a color, you select a price, and then you apply, and that would come back with a new subset of aggregations, which means the filter modal here would actually like change in appearance between applying filters, which is a weird experience. And after several rounds of development and Dev doing a great job with QAing, I just came to the realization that we only need to request the data necessary to render this filter modal on the initial render of the page. So this is different than what you might call layered navigation, which uses those aggregations to sort of drill down. This just does an initial, like, give me all the things that are filterable for this category, and then drop them into this modal on the side. And those will never change for this category. And so this is a much better experience than what I showed off, I want to say two weeks ago. And then I'll just real quick show you. So you can go in here and search for something, and we can say, like, give me the tanks. And so now the search results are also filterable. So these are, you'll notice there's also a category. You can filter for tanks inside blouses and sweaters and a certain price. And the filters are applying and getting you back results. So that PR was 2166. It's been merged to develop now. Hopefully it'll go out with the next release. And if you guys want to poke around the code just to see how it was done technically, or get a write-up of what I did in this PR, that'd be really cool. And I'll be on the Slack if you have any questions. I have one more demo if there's no questions right now about the filters.
Yeah, I have a short note. It looks very nice. Only one thing is missing. We should add also sorting to the search page. Maybe we can, or I can create a ticket in a backlog, because it was missing, or I see it is missing in for the search page.
Good eye. Yes, you're correct. I remember you added sorting for the category page. And when I actually started working on filtering, I only did filtering on the category page. And then I realized we also had filtering on the search page, so I had to go back and sort of reapply it there. So I think that's a good opportunity for a feature request.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great call out, Lars. Yeah, we'll between you and I, we'll get the story created, and I think that's a good candidate also for the community board, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes.
Okay. I don't know how much time I have.
You got time.
Okay. I'll just go quickly over this next thing. It's in progress right now, so I just wanted to sort of show you something that I worked on yesterday a little bit. So right now let's see, we're on develop. I've added some items to my cart. So right now the experience on develop is that when you are on the cart page and you're making a mutation such as modifying a quantity, there's a brief moment, you might not catch it on the call, but there's a brief moment where the entire product form grays out. And the reason being, we have a race condition that can occur when you fire off two mutations at the same time, where they get out of sync. The results on the server come back because they don't have the context of the prior mutation. Basically, if I update this quantity and in the same time that this network request was going out and I clicked on the other quantity, the results could get out of sync. So the way that we prevented that was by monitoring for like an in-flight mutation, and then whenever we had one, we would just disable the UI. So you can't do anything in the product form, right? So that's why you see that graying out experience right there. So one way around that is to not do anything to the UI. So just to put this out there, this is the experience that Amazon actually has. They actually, if you go on Amazon right now and you change quantity inside your cart, they put like a mask over the only thing. They put a loading spinner and you can't do anything. Other sites, Old Navy, I want to say, do a different experience where they don't actually let you interact with other things. They don't apply a mask, but it's masked, so you can't see anything being done, but it's like doing something in the background. So what I did yesterday was wrote a little queue link for Apollo where every time it gets a mutation call, if a mutation is in flight, it just stacks it behind the next one and waits for it to finish. So what effect that has is in the UI, you can fire off as many mutations as you want. I'm clicking a bunch of stuff here, and you'll see over here, the result kind of blinks out for a bit because I added that, so it's a loading state. But it doesn't, it lets you do changes to the UI much quicker and doesn't cause any blocking experiences for like while that network request is in flight. So overall, and we still have some finessing to do with UX. I haven't really talked to Samia or Scott about this, maybe briefly before I left yesterday, before they could say anything one way or the other. But personally, I think this is a good experience, and my wife also agrees.
Well,
and so
what can I possibly say?
So
Building a
sample
case.
size of 1. This is the way we're going. No, but I just wanted to show you guys. This is a little cool thing. The PR is 2215. It's just I didn't make it a draft on accident, but it's got some options for how we can handle this. The idea was just to sort of prevent mutations from having a race condition, and this is one way that I prefer. I think is really cool, and that we can do as many mutations as we want, and they just queue up after another. And if you look at a network, it's sort of like a laddered mutation thing instead of them all firing together.
Yeah, cool.
Zetland-like.
Me like.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Any questions for Stephen?
This was Tommy's idea, by the way. So if anyone has any problems with it.
So I was going to ask you a question, I feel like this is like a general gap in Apollo, right? Like, do you think we might publish this just as like a new Apollo link that
So Apollo, and this might be, I might not have done the due diligence necessary here. Apollo has docs around their link system, and they provide a bunch of link implementations that people have written. There is one called Link Batch that lets you provide a custom function for how to batch, and that may actually do what we want, but it was like overkill in a way, and I didn't want to rely on someone else's implementation if we could just write our own. So, and I wanted to experiment with it. So, this could be a very simple thing. You could pass in the thing that you're trying to make sure gets queued. It could be an operation name. Make sure that only the mutations named update item quantity get queued. But definitely, I could see us publishing this as it doesn't have to be part of PW Studio. It could be a separate package or.
Yeah, to me, the background that's important, if it can be hard to remember this, Tommy, I don't know if this is something you looked at in your research, but for those kind of wondering along those lines, why Apollo seems to be missing things or to have features we can't use, it's because a great deal of the Apollo client is optimized for the Apollo server as a backend for GraphQL. The link batching is a perfect example where, the Apollo link batch is a perfect example. The way that you batch queries using the Apollo client and Apollo server kind of unified system is that you simply post an array of GraphQL queries instead of combining them in some fancier way. And that's actually not part of the GraphQL spec. It's just something that Apollo does. So the cheap, easy batching, which we would love, is not available to us when we're not using an Apollo server, which Magento's GraphQL is not today. I shouldn't talk out of school, but an Apollo server may be part of an offering that we end up with, or depending on the way that you as a community solution integrator deploy it, you may end up with an Apollo server in front of Magento yourself. And that will enable a lot of these things. That said, we are working real hard to add things like link batching in our own context without making you think about it too much. So we'll have custom links for all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think this mutation queue link is like a really basic example. And it's totally it'll exist in the Venia your entry point in Venia concept or whatever your entry point is in your own apps. So you can take it out if you don't want that experience. Or it might not land. We'll see. It's still an in-flight PR. So
awesome. Any other questions, comments from anyone on the line? Cool. All right, so Jordan had to drop off the line because he had a customer on site, so he had to jump into a meeting. So I will give a community corner, insert community corner graphic. Update. I'll give the update for community corner for him. So over the last couple weeks, we've been saying that we're working on improving the process, improving our documentation around community contribution, and working with PWA Studio. I think for a lot of the community members, you guys are probably used to some of that same process across other projects in Magento. And so we've been trying to figure out how do we evolve what we've been doing in our project and how we've been working with everyone. I specifically am looking at Lars because he's constantly keeps us honest by asking us, hey, I want to help you guys out and work on stuff, but I don't know what to work on next, right? So we, let me share my screen. I'm dialed in. So we have been working on putting together a community backlog specific project within GitHub where everyone can go to look at what are the items that the team and the community are prioritizing for community contribution right now. We have put this board together over the last few weeks. We've done some grooming sessions with Jordan and Tommy helping out to make sure that these items are all relevant and valuable for the project. And this is a first stab at kind of establishing this new process and using it moving forward. So we've also updated, I'm talking really fast right now because we only have a few minutes, but we also updated our contributing guideline documentation. It's not updated right now. It's in process. It'll be updated very shortly, but the new process will be outlined on this page within the dev docs. So you can go there to read more, but basically we've created a Kanban board. You can see what are the items that are in the backlog. You can see the items that we've prioritized and say we'd like for someone to pick up next. And so the process will kind of work through the community maintainers. Right now, that's Jordan. So if you're interested in picking up an item in the community and you're asking, what can you help out with? You can come look at the board, look at some of these issues, talk to Jordan, and figure out how you can be assigned to the issue to help us work on it. So for example, there's a push notifications, a kind of proof of concept item here. And so we've kind of defined the scope for this particular issue. You'll see that typically by the time they hit the prioritize phase, it should have some detail from the internal core team on how to best implement this particular feature. And then, once it's assigned, the team will kind of help Sherpa it across the line.
Yeah.
So
merge card would be a good one to look at.
Yes.
Let's look at merge card. So yeah, a lot more. I think we got some feedback too that like a lot of community members, they'll submit a PR and then they'll get a ton of feedback from us about how like it doesn't really fit our standards or like that's not quite what we were looking for, and like we didn't even provide you guidance. So like there's like we should have expected that. So now when we tag something as help wanted, we're going to try to guide you towards like the implementation that we would be looking for. So not like too much hand holding to like patronize the community, but enough guidance that like the PR you submit should be very easily submitted if you followed these guidelines. So you should see a lot more content like this. It should be a lot easier to kind of pick up tickets with zero handoff, but still we're available if you have any questions and want to get started on something. But this is a good example. Developer or community member from Atwix noticed that we weren't using merge cart. It is ready to be implemented, so this would be a great first issue for somebody because it touches on Talons, it touches on our new kind of component structure, touches on GraphQL and Apollo. So I think it'd be a really good way to kind of dip your toe into PWA Studio if anybody is interested. Awesome.
Thank you, Tommy. Yeah, so right now this is a very set list of items. You can see we only have 11 items right now between the backlog and prioritize. It's a very curated list. We're going to evolve the process and of course we'll start feeding the backlog with even more items from either community contributed feature requests or bugs that the community finds or items that the core team itself has said, hey, based on our current focus, we don't have time to implement this, but we'd love for it to be implemented. And you'll start to see those items on this board as well. So any questions, thoughts? Everything is great. All right. So if you're asking yourself, how do I get started, right? Again, reach out to Jordan for now as the community maintainer. He can help help people get assigned to the issues that are in the prioritized column. And of course, we'll continue to evolve the process. We'll continue to iterate the process, and then retro the process and see how it works for not only the internal core team but also the community. Great. Perfect. All right, well, that puts us with a minute left if there are no other questions. I didn't see anything else come in from the community for Community Corner in terms of things that you'd like to demo. But if you have those moving forward, again, reach out to Jordan for Community Corner items. That is it for us, so onwards and upwards. Onwards and upwards.
Honk.
Honk if you like it. Don't forget to smash like and subscribe.
Something like that, yeah.
Recording has ended. Have a great weekend. Smooches.
Here we go. Oh, wow, that made
This is
it
good.
in.
Yeah, this is good.
Smooches.
Smooches, all right.
Okay, okay.
Thanks, everyone.